excited. It's an exciting day, an event here in Hillsborough County, and I just couldn't be more proud of everyone that's in this room that is putting a stake in the ground around early learning and why we feel like it's a true game changer for our community. We have so many great partners here with us today. We have folks that we're hosting from other parts of the country as well. We want to thank REL Southeast for their partnership in this event. To truly, bring some of the experts here to the table, people in other communities across this region who are doing some really great work that we can learn from, and hopefully learn a little bit of the things that we're doing here in Hillsborough County as well. How many of you have ever watched the Twilight Zone? Okay, that really shows the generational mix in this room, because I can raise my hand because I remember many times watching the Twilight Zone when I was so those of you who don't know or have never watched the Twilight Zone, let me give you a little bit of a description of that particular show. It's kind of where two worlds collide. You are in a world that makes perfect sense to you, and all of a sudden today you wake up and you start to enter into a world by which everyone else in that world thinks it makes sense except for you. And sometimes I think in education we are in the Twilight Zone. Because sometimes, we wake up and we think, oh, that doesn't make sense in this world. Many times as we talk about early learning and we think about our students entering kindergarten not ready yet, but we have this clear expectation that 4 years later, every single student across the entire state will be proficient when they're not starting at the same starting line. And so we have to recognize that and call that out a little bit and say, that's not where we want to be as a community. I often think sometimes, where would other professions be if they had that same type of thought process? So I'm going to liken it to a professional basketball. Let's just put it that way. So let's just say we had two teams that were going to be playing. One team was made up of players who were not quite as prepared as the other players on the other team, and they were going to be playing the same game. Now, the team that was not quite prepared was told right before the beginning of the game, because you're not as prepared, you're going to probably start the game about 20 points behind the other team. But by the end of the fourth quarter, you are going to have to be at the same point of the rest of the other players on the other team. The goal is to be tied at the end of the game. Now, I cannot imagine what those players and those coaches would be thinking on that team. Like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense in this world. I'm looking and I'm seeing my players, and I'm not sure in 4 quarters that's going to be able to happen. But, they go in with a lot of belief because they have coaches, they have people on that team that believe in their players, and they provide all kinds of supports that they can, and they work really, really, really hard. And at the end of those 4 quarters, they still come up a little short, just as they kind of had predicted. And so, because of that team might have been called low performing because they didn't quite meet that particular mark. Does that resonate with you in this room? That particular coach may be told he's going to have to be replaced by another coach because they weren't quite able to make success for that particular team. The players were offered transfers to other teams because the other teams, obviously, they would prefer to play for that were more successful. The other coaches were going to be really enthused about this, of course, and they're going to want to stay, and they're going to want to perform that next year just as hard, knowing that the outcome may very well be the same. And then they're told, oh, by the way, next year, you're going to do this all over again. That sometimes is the world we live in education, where we know where the challenges lie. We know that at the very beginning of the game, our students are not coming to us as prepared as we would need them to be. And so the goal really that we're working on here in Hillsborough County and across this region is we have to make sense of this world. And the way you make sense of this world is you go back and ensure that every single player on every single team is prepared at the start of the game. And that's really what our mission is here in Hillsborough County in this particular region. We are so fortunate as a school district, we are not in this alone. We are in this with so many partners in the community that I want to just highlight very quickly here. We have joining us today, we have the Executive Director from the Early Learning Coalition, Gordon Gillette. We have the executive director from our children's board, Ms. Kelly Harris, and we have the executive director from Healthy Start Coalition, Ms. Jane Murphy. Those are key pillar partners that we're working alongside here in our school district, and we'll be part of a panel later on to be able to hopefully make a little bit more sense of some of the collaboration we've been working on here in Hillsborough County. But I want to call out all the partners in this room, from those folks in our school district that are working so hard in this particular effort, to our university partners, to our nonprofits and other organizations in our community. We have called it out. And sometimes when you call something out, people forget that you are actually the ones that are trying to remedy the problem. You haven't been necessarily the creator, but you are going to be the fixer. So we are determined in the face of a lot of headwinds. Because when you call things out, you get headwinds, don't you? You get doubters, you get fence riders, you get people that are going to wait to see if this is really going to play out, and then they're going to be on your team. And I think we have the players in our community right now. We have the leaders at our schools. We have the coaches and teachers at our schools to ultimately make this the true game changer in our community. And as a superintendent, I could not be any more proud to really be here today. We have our partners from REL Southeast. As I said, they brought with them some folks from other parts of the region that we really hope to learn from. And thank you very much for your embracing early learning as the true game changer. We do believe that is going to ultimately change the whole rest of the continuum for learning here in Hillsborough County. And really, as educators, we play a role in not just the education of our students. We play a role in the thriving of our community. And that's really where it all starts. It starts in early learning, ensuring that every single student in Hillsborough County walks into the first day of kindergarten ready to learn, equipped with the skills necessary to ultimately allow our amazing teachers and leaders and staff across this community to take them to the next level. And then ultimately do what Ms. Shamburger and I are going to be doing in about 20 or 30 minutes, leaving here and going over to the Straw Center and congratulating about 700 high school students for entering into the workforce and post-secondary. That's what this is all about. It's ensuring not just getting something started, an initiative that we're starting. It's about an initiative that we're ultimately going to sustain in our community to create a thriving community. So that being said, I know we also have partners from our Department of Education here today. And that's very important that our department partners in the room come alongside of our school districts. That we sometimes are facing those alternative worlds that we're facing with great amounts of stress sometimes. And so we need help in making sense of that particular world. So I want to thank everyone really for being here in this commitment to the work. Knowing that our teachers here in Hillsborough County work so hard, and especially at our highest need schools that have high concentrations of students who walk in that first day of school, not necessarily being kindergarten ready, but they give it their all. And what we're trying to create for our teachers is a great story to tell. And so that great story to tell will be when our students walk into kindergarten ready, and they can actually teach off of their strengths rather than their deficits. And then that changes the whole way we educate students here in Hillsborough County through our lifetime. So that means that I have the honor to introduce Ms. Tamara Shamburger, the board of our chair, who's also a champion in the early learning work. Ms. Shamburger.
Good morning, everyone. I am again Tamara Shamburger, extremely honored to serve Hillsborough County as the chair of the school board. And so in 2015, I'll tell you why I decided to run for school board. To me, I needed to know and find out what was happening in my community. Why were so many students perpetually low performers? Why was there a large achievement gap? Why were we behind the ball when it came to student achievement? And so in 2015, I decided I needed to know why, and I needed to be a part of the solution. And so for the last 2.5, almost 3 years that I've been a part of the Hillsborough County School District, I've learned that it's because of a lot of reasons, a lot of complex reasons. But mainly, it's all about what we're doing to prepare our students before they get to public school. And so I've become a champion for this early learning initiative, for early childhood education, because I am confident it's this word that's going to be the shift our community needs to prepare our students to be future leaders, to be successful in their school careers. And so I'm extremely proud to be here today. And so I'm also proud to have a superintendent who's made early learning a priority in our districts. The board certainly supports that, and we're looking forward to what's going to happen with this initiative. And we're certainly proud that Hillsborough County Public Schools has become a leader in the nation behind this type of work. And so I'd like to thank each of you, every partner, for being here this morning and allowing us to engage in this very important conversation about what can we do better to also help with this initiative. So thank you so much for letting us be here. Thank you for partnering with us, and we look forward to a very successful conference today. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Barbara Foreman. I'm Director of the Regional Educational Lab Southeast, and that is at Florida State University. And it's embedded within the Florida Center for Reading Research. So we're thrilled to be able to partner with Hillsborough County Public Schools today on this important topic of early learning. Superintendent Eakin's goal to bring early childhood partners together with district early childhood staff to bridge the gap between early childhood and K-12 is a really critical point for us to focus on today and throughout the rest of our lives. The REL Southeast goal is we are the leader of all 10 regional laboratories funded by Institute of Education Sciences across the United States. We are the point people on school readiness. So we have created a set of infographics. You'll see these posters around on the Ready Child, the Ready School, the Ready Family, the Ready Community. And an infographic is full of embedded links to resources, to research, to evidence-based practice on these topics. And so the breakout sessions you'll attend later in the afternoon are around these topics. So we hope you enjoy the day. I have the pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Nicole Patton. And if anyone is here from Atlanta, from Georgia State, I apologize, we stole her from you. And now she is at Florida State University in the Florida Center for Reading Research and in the School of Teacher Education. Dr. Terry's research, teaching, and scholarly activities concern young children with and without disabilities who struggle to acquire language and literacy skills, in particular children from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds and children living in poverty. Focused primarily on children from pre-kindergarten through grade 3, her work includes experimental intervention and evaluation studies of reading, writing, and oral language development, achievement, instruction, and professional development. Dr. Terry's research has been supported by federal grants, private foundations, and the United Way of Greater Atlanta. At the Florida Center for Reading Research, Dr. Terry directs The Village, a division responsible for creating and maintaining research practice partnerships with diverse community stakeholders, including early childhood education centers, schools, school districts, state departments, philanthropic and nonprofit groups, and civic and business leaders. It's with great pleasure that I introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Nicole Patton.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Can you hear me okay? Is the mic? Great. All right. Thank you so much for having us here. We're really excited to partner with you on this event to focus on young children. And so I put our disclaimer up there just to make clear that we are here to share our wonderful information with you, but we in no way enforce you to do. But we do hope you listen to us and hope that you learn from the things that we're about to share. I also want to thank my partners for joining us here today. I really do think it takes a village to create positive outcomes for children and families, and as you will know from this slide, you will see that there are many diverse partners that I've worked with over time to improve outcomes for children and families, whether they be schools or state departments or the local museum or advocacy groups and other researchers who help us move the needle for young children. So we're here to talk about how to impact positive change for our youngest learners. Superintendent Eakins gave us the example of the basketball team. I'm going to give you an example of my own family. So I'm one of 7 children, And when you are one of 7 children, that means that you're going to get a ton of grandchildren. So in my family, we currently have 19 grandchildren. Number 20 is due in June. Just as soon as school year gets off, his mom's Christmas. So that timing worked out really well. When you look at this family of young children, these 19 youngsters here, when you look at them, you can see certain differences amongst them just by looking at them, right? What can you see? Somebody tell me some of the differences you can see.
Different sizes.
Different sizes. Some are really, really, really tall, some not just yet, but soon will be. Height grows in my family. I am the shortest person amongst my siblings. My brother is 6'8", so it's very likely we'll see a lot of height there. What else? Say it again. Yes, we have boys and girls. Right now, the boys are winning. We have more boys and girls. What else do you see? Numbers, right? The numbers represent their birth order from the oldest to the youngest. The oldest at the time that picture was taken is 14. The youngest was almost 6 months old. What else can you see? Anything else that stands out to you? How about temperament? Some of us are really happy to be here. Some of us are really not happy to be here. Although you can see all of these things on the surface, there's plenty here you can't see. You can't see, for example, that some of these children are performing 2 and 3 grade levels above expectation, while some are performing well below. There's one child amongst here who's nonverbal. You can't see that there are children here who have certain mental health concerns, who are receiving treatment for those mental health concerns right now. You can't see where they live. These children live at the time in Atlanta and in LA and in Dallas and in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So they have different communities around them that their parents can take advantage of. You can't see that these children have a parent who is a professor at a university and a parent who's a 3rd grade teacher in Atlanta Public Schools, and a parent who's the vice president of JPMorgan Chase, and a parent who works for a nonprofit. So their families have different resources available to them that they can bring into the home. But despite all of these differences amongst these children, our family will never allow any one of them not to thrive. It's just not an option for us. All of our children in our family, no matter how they came to us, will thrive in this world. It's a commitment we have made to our children and our family. You are here because you've made the same commitment to the children in Hillsborough County. To do that, you're going to base your movements and everything that you do based on science. And I don't think I need to convince all of you in this room what science tells us about how important it is those first 5 years of a child's life. We know from the science that children's brains are wired to learn as soon as they get here, and that most of early brain development happens before age 3. We know from the science that these brains don't exist in a bubble, that they engage and interact in their environment with other adults and other children and other individuals around them, so that these brains develop in response to the interactions that they have with people in their environment. That means that families matter. But families live in communities, which means those communities matter. And there are schools in those communities, so what happens in those schools matters. It all matters. So school success begins well before children step foot in that school building. It starts from birth. We also know that as powerful as early childhood education is, and that if you experience high quality early learning experiences, you will see immediate positive outcomes as children are in preschool and pre-K, but you'll also see it as children move through the schooling years, all the way through elementary school, even into adulthood. But we know that quality varies. And though we see more and more states taking on funding for preschool and pre-K programs, we're now up to at least 40 states, more than 40 states who provide some level of state funding for pre-K. Some states are starting to look at providing funding for 3-year-old programs as well. There are still great disparities that happen for how well children can benefit from high quality early learning experiences. In general, quality matters, but quality varies often for children of color and children growing up in poverty. They are less likely to attend a center-based early childhood program, and if they do, they're more likely to attend one that is not of the level of quality that would suggest they'll be ready when they enter school. So we still have work to do to make sure that everyone has access to high-quality early learning experiences. But when they do, they tend to be ready. One way to think about this is to try to consider a framework that exists both within and outside of schools. So this is one framework. There are many frameworks out there. This one in particular is the National School Readiness Indicators Initiative. Happened about 10 years ago, but several governors and several states came together to try to have a unified understanding of what it would take to ensure that children were ready when they entered school. And they came away with this equation, ready child equation, where you have ready families, ready communities, ready services, and ready schools. If all of these elements are working together, you'd be more likely to ensure that children enter school ready. So one thing we want to think about here in Hillsborough is, what's your framework? Is this a framework that you can agree with? Is this a framework you can work towards? Do you have something different you would like to do? There are more than one. There are many frameworks out there. This is one in particular I like because it helps us make it clear to anyone in the room that they all have a role to play in ensuring that children are ready for school. No matter if you are a teacher, or a principal, or a parent, or a civic leader, or a business leader, we all have a role to play. If we all have a role to play, then we must admit that it's not going to take just one thing to ensure that children are ready for school. This is my least favorite question. People often ask you what's the one thing we should do. I firmly believe that there are a ton of really smart people in this room right now. Raise your hand if you think you're smart. We're super smart. I think that if it was just one thing, we would have figured that out by now. And we wouldn't need to be here. It's not just one thing. There are many things that must happen to ensure that children are ready when they enter school. And I don't think I need to convince you all in this room that there are many things that we need to do and that you all have a role to play. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. So I don't think our issue is knowing that this is important. In a room full of the willing, what is it going to take to get us to move beyond what we know to doing things that we think will impact readiness for young children? What are the challenges and what are the opportunities? First, I think we have to admit that partnership is hard. It's hard to work together. We've already just determined and understood that this is going to take some cross-sector movement, but getting a bunch of people in the room together to agree and work on the same thing is pretty hard to do. Anybody remember Ghostbusters? The first one? The original one? Remember when they were fighting the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and the only way they could win is if they crossed the streams? And what Egon said was, there's something very important I forgot to tell you, don't cross the streams, it would be bad. Try to imagine life, all life as you know it, stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light. That's what it feels like to partner often. It's just that hard to get everybody on the same page. So often you have either your Ghostbusters in the world who like to cross the streams, or you have your stay in your own lane people. No roads, stay on your road. I think, and I'm biased, but I'm a bit of a Ghostbuster. I think partnerships are necessary, especially if you're going to impact our most vulnerable children and families, because the reality is they're often touching multiple systems anyway. So they do need all of us. It's hard to establish and maintain partnerships. It can feel like there are too many cooks in the kitchen. It can feel like we're trying to make too many different decisions. There are state drivers, there are local drivers, there are national drivers that make a difference in what we do. And of course, everybody's busy. So even getting us all here today is really hard. But the hard truth is, if we expect to make impactful, sustainable, positive change for children to ensure that they're ready in school, this is a non-negotiable. We have to figure out how to do it, which means we have to put work into doing it. We have to put work into being good partners. What are the structures? What are the funding that is necessary to make that happen? What kind of identifiable leadership is there? An identifiable space. And we're going to hear from some of our identifiable leaders, and those were counted pretty soon. You also have to make the time. It's work. It's not easy, but we have to make the time to ensure that these partnerships work and actually get us the bang for the buck that we want. And I think you always have to continue to ask, who's not at this table? Who are we missing? Often there are people, there are organizations, there are instances, things that can inform our work and which is not clear because they're not there. So we have to think through who's not there and try to get them to the table. A resource that can help you here in thinking about how do you do that is collective impact. Collective impact is a term that's been around for a while. It's a pretty super sexy term these days. Lots of people talk about having collective impact. In our state, in Florida, a lot of places talking about taking collective impact approaches to improving outcomes. One thing you need to think about if you take a collective impact approach is there are 3 necessary components here. You must have a common agenda, you must have shared measurement, and you must have aligned efforts. And typically there is some centralized backbone organization that's holding us all together. In Hillsborough, you do have some, what I would consider to be these centralized backbone infrastructure kind of agencies working together towards pushing the needle forward for school readiness for young children. And you're going to hear about many of them today. You can also, here's one example, the Strive initiative is out of Cincinnati. It's been around for quite a while. They are sort of the pioneers of taking collective impact approach and thinking about cradle to college. That's a super sexy term out there, right? So if you go take a look at the Strive initiative and see how they've done this, they've now grown to a network across the nation of different communities that are taking the collective impact approach. Here's one, I picked up one specifically here in Florida in Escambia County where they started Achieve. Achieve is not very old, it's only maybe 2 years old, but they started to take a collective impact approach to improving outcomes from cradle to career in Escambia County. Once we decide to work together and that we're going to be partners, our next challenge is making sure that we're actually saying the same thing. What's the message? We often think that we're working towards the same outcome, but really, it can often feel like this.
Why not? Well, I'll make sure some of the guys came from the team, so I mean, I'm on the street or the ballpark, I'll be able to say hello to those people. Like, sure, I'll introduce them to the boys. Anybody make the Oh, I know to get those ball players over from the line. See, on the team, we have who's on first, what's on second, I don't know who's on third. You know what I mean? Yes. You know the guy's name? Sure, I'll tell you the guy's name. I say who's on first, what's on second, I don't know who's on third. You know what I mean? And then, yes. You know the guy's name? I'm telling you that name. Oh, who's on first? Yeah. Oh, you got who? The guy on first. Who? The guy playing first base. Who? The guy on first. Who is on first? What are you asking me, Bob? I'm telling you. You ain't telling me that. I'm asking you who's on first. That's it. Well, go ahead and tell me. Who? The guy on first base. That's whose name? Yeah. Well, go ahead and tell me. That's the man's name. That's whose name? Yeah. Well, go ahead and tell me. Who is on first? What are you asking me? I'm asking you.
Sometimes we think we're saying the same thing, but are we really saying and agreeing to the same thing? When we say all children enter school ready to learn and ready to succeed, what do we mean when we say all children? Do we mean just pre-K, when they hit pre-K? Do we mean age 3 to 3rd grade? Do we mean birth? And if we mean birth, do we mean prenatally? When we say all children, do we mean all children? English language learners? Do we mean children growing up in poverty? Do we mean children with disabilities? Have we thought about all children? When we say ready to learn, well, what does ready to learn mean? Are we talking about developmental skills and milestones? Are we talking about 3rd grade reading scores? Are we talking about social, emotional, and behavioral outcomes? Are we talking about reading, writing, math? Are we talking about cognitive skills? Are we talking about physical motor skills? Because that matters to development as well. When we say succeed, what do we mean by succeed? What is our measure of success? Is our measure of success 3rd grade reading? Is our measure of success high school graduation rates? Is our measure of success number of kids participating in career and technical education programs? Is our measure of success something that's outside of a school? So when we say these things, and we want to partner together on these things, are we really talking about the same thing? It's important if you decide to take a collective approach that you try to find come together with the same message, so you're seeing the same thing over and over and over again, and that everyone's on board with that idea. So here's an example in Georgia. There's an agency there called the Georgia Early Education Alliance for Ready Students, nonprofit, nonpartisan group there. This is their mission statement, and you will notice down here that they say by 2020, all students will enter kindergarten prepared to succeed and on a path to read, to learn by 3rd grade. And they're going to do that by focusing on babies' brains, children's vocabulary, economic implications of high-quality early learning, and high-quality early education. There's another group, Get Georgia Reading, which is our grade level reading campaign. Some of you are familiar with Florida's grade level reading campaign. That's a national initiative. In Georgia, we have, ours is called Get Georgia Reading. And what you will notice is that by 2020, all children will be on a path to 3rd grade reading proficiency. And they're going to do that by focusing on babies' brains. And they're going to do that by focusing on high-quality early child education. They've aligned. Both of these are state-level groups. One is primarily focused on 0 to 5. One is primarily focused on 3rd grade reading, but they're aligned. Here's one resource that might help, and it's something I think we often don't think about in our space, but a communication strategy doesn't hurt. It helps us figure out what we mean by what we say and make sure that we're staying on message in the delivery and design of what we want to do. So we actually had someone come, Chris Jenkins, she came and gave us a session on how to do this. We talked about the 5 C's of message development. It doesn't hurt to think about what's your message and how you're delivering it. Now we're going to work together, and we're going to stay on page and say the same things. And darn it, we need data.
And this one of them says clarity.
Not many people love data. It depends on who you are, which one of these meanings resonates with you in terms of your personal relationship with data. Some of us love it. Many of us who are researchers in universities like myself, we kind of like it a lot, maybe a little too much, but we do love the data. But depending on who you are, you might really feel like this is not the place I want to be. Depending on who you are, you might doubt, you might be a Wahlburger, you might be a Gosling. If you're the person in your school district who has to send out a survey, you might be this guy. You might be a Liam. No one ever answers survey. You need a good secret sauce to get the answer to your survey. Data is really hard. It's hard to get good data. But unfortunately, I wouldn't say unfortunately because I kind of like data. The hard truth of it is, you need the data. You need the data because it helps you tell your story. People think about data often in terms of accountability because we've increased accountability in our space, and people think that the only way to be accountable is to show it in your data. I'm sure I don't have to convince all of you in this room that that's not necessarily the case. But it is a necessary thing. You need the data. The data tells your story. It tells you what you're doing, if what you're doing is making an impact. It helps you learn about what you're doing, what's working, what's not working, how we might change it to improve the outcomes we intend to see, which means it helps us act. It helps us figure out what should we do next. If we can start to think about data as less of an accountability structure and more about something that can help us learn so we can do things differently, I think we might develop a different relationship with our data. But as you think about data and think about these indicators, you have to ask yourself, what are the indicators that map onto what it is you want to know? And there are a lot of indicators. There are county level indicators. There are community level indicators. Are you going to go by zip code or census tract to look at your data? Are you going to look just at a school or an entire district or feeder pattern, right? You have to think about what that data is and think about the quality of the data. What is valid, what is reliable, and what can you get? Because some data isn't easily gotten. Once you know what data you're going to have, one very important question you need to ask yourself is this data indicating something you can change? That is it malleable? There are a lot of data indicators out there, but those aren't all things we can move in our space. What are the things you can move in your your space? What are the indicators that let you know whether or not you're moving? And once you have this data, own your data. It is your data. Anytime you put up a data point, someone in the room is going to say, well, that's not right. That's not what it was. No, it wasn't. Own your data. It is your data. It is telling your story, whether you like it or not. So own it. But don't just own it. Use it. Make it accessible. There's no point in having data just to have data. Data should be a tool that you can use to support the outcomes that you want to see for your children and families. Here are a few examples in another community. Again, I'm showing a lot of examples from Georgia and from Atlanta because that's where I've done a lot of my work. In Atlanta, you will find we have moved in the last 10 years to being in a space where we're almost drowning in data. We have a lot of data out there. So we have, for example, Years has developed a blueprint resource mapping tools. So we're using geocodes to visualize school readiness indicators. So that framework we talked about, ready schools, ready children, ready families, ready communities, they decided specific indicators for each one of those pieces of the framework and map them out. So in a community, you can see what resources are available to you to move that needle. Our United Way has developed a child well-being index that has many of those same indicators, but they are also looking at community level indicators because United Ways concern themselves with the entire community or county level in which they work. And so their indicators are looking at a community to think through in a specific county, how well are the children on multiple indicators. Their indicators include education, and they include health, and they include safety, and they include affordable housing rates, because that's what United Way cares about. We've also, in our grade level reading campaign, have developed a data landscape tool where our grade level reading campaign has decided that there are 12 indicators that are associated with third grade reading levels. And so if we want to move the needle on third grade reading, we need to consider all of these different possible indicators, which include things, yes, they include third grade reading scores, but they include things like attendance at school, maternal education levels, the child care climate, the school climate. And so they use these mapping tools. For example, this is DeKalb County Schools, which was the school district that my children are in when I lived in Atlanta. And you can pull up a dashboard to see the percentage of children who are missing 6 or more days of school. You can see what the overall percentage is, as well as if it differs by disability group, by socioeconomic status, by school, by school system. You can play with the data, move around with the data to help you think through what's happening as it relates to attendance in this county that we might do something about. Because attendance matters to how well children are doing in school. You can have the best teacher in the world, but if the kids aren't there to learn from them, it doesn't matter. That's why you have to care about attendance. Does that make sense? And then they take their data and they build a framework. They decided they're going to work on these 4 areas, and these are the data indicators that tell us they should work on these 4 areas, and these are the programs they're going to do to move the needle on those indicators. That's how the data helps you learn. It's how it helps you tell your story. It's how it helps you think about what you should do next. Yes, it does hold you accountable to your plan, but if you notice, the focus isn't on accountability. The focus is on doing something that we know that works to support children and families. So you partner together, you decide you're going to do this work together, and you've got your data, you're on message for what you're going to do. So now you've got a lot of data, so you know some stuff. Now what are you going to do about it, right? You've got to move from knowing to doing. And the fact is, we do know quite a bit about what it takes to ensure that children enter school ready to learn and ready to succeed. We're just having difficulty moving towards the doing part. But there's science to that too. People talk about it in different ways. Implementation science is a term that's being thrown out there quite a bit. The thought about implementation science is just moving us towards effectiveness. We already know what works, can get to work at scale, in schools and in communities, despite all the challenges that exist in schools and communities. So Rosenwald and Behringer, this book, Implementing Evidence-Based Academic Interventions in Schools. There are a few books out there on this topic, but they suggest that there are 6 steps you must go through. That you need to consider the knowledge of the research evidence first. What is the available research evidence out there that says what we should or shouldn't do, what should or should not work, based on what we know? Then secondly, what are the structures that need us to be in place to help us translate that research into practice? Third, what about systems? Because these things are going to happen in a system. Whether that system is at the school district level, or the school building level, or even in the classroom level, because classrooms are systems. So how do you think about making things work in that system? How do you move into classrooms? How do you tell if it's working? By evaluating it. And what kind of professional development supports are necessary for everyone involved to make sure you get what you expect to see. What you should notice here is that it is a process. It is not just going into a building or going online, choosing a curriculum, choosing a strategy, and let's just do it. That in and of itself doesn't work. You have to think through all the parts and pieces of the process and make sure all those parts and pieces are given their thorough attention to ensure that what you pick up off that shelf actually gets you the return you expect to see. There's a National Implementation Research Network out at UNC Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina Chapel Hill. They have some resources there as well around how to think about what you might choose to implement and your readiness for implementing it. They use this hexagon tool to help you think about implementing it. There are other resources out there available as well. I am purposely trying to show you the things that I know of that are free, that you can go look at right now and help think through the things you want to do. So now that you've had a lot of thought about what it is you're going to do to move from knowing to doing, you have a decision to make about improvement versus innovation. Because here's the deal. We know a lot, but we don't know everything. There's still more we need to learn and understand to make sure that these things we know that work in supportive conditions also work in conditions that aren't always as supportive. Sometimes we need to be innovative to think those things through. Other times we just need to do better. Where are you in this process for what it is that you decided you want to do? Whatever innovation or new program or practice or policy that you want to do. Improvement means doing it better. Innovation means doing it differently. Sometimes you need a little bit of both. This is an example of a statement that this random guy made that I was Googling around trying to figure out how to show the difference between innovation and improvement. But I thought it was a wonderful example because he talks about, in some instances, you just need a candle, and in some instances, you need a light bulb. There was tremendous innovation in the creation of a light bulb, but if the power goes out, that light bulb doesn't help you. You need a candle. You have to think through what is your problem space, what is the thing you're trying to move, and do you require innovation to make that happen, or do you just need to do some things better? So I think we have to have that honest conversation with ourselves about balancing innovation and improvement. And innovation is one of those sexy terms. Everybody wants to be innovative. We've all got to do something new. I'm a researcher. It's part of my job description. I'm always supposed to be coming up with the next new innovative thing. That's the job for me. But sometimes you will find that there are a lot of really great things out there that people have been doing. There are plenty of wonderful things out there that I'm sure are happening here in your current context. Sometimes you just need to do those things and do them better. And balancing both of those together will likely move this needle for us. So what can we learn from others to act quickly and improve? And what are the opportunities for leading us forward? Here's one example. Talk With Me Baby. Some of you might be familiar with Talk With Me Baby. It is something that came out of United Way and several partners in Atlanta. But it has crossed the state line, so I know it exists in the state of Florida in different places. I'm not sure if it's something you're using here. But it is another one of those free and available resources where what they decided to do was come together and say, we know that talking to your baby makes a difference to their readiness and how well they're doing in school. We are pushing these initiatives often towards families to get them to talk to their baby. But what if we got nurses to do it? What if we got people in the emergency rooms to do it? Because often, in particular for our most vulnerable children and families, the emergency room is their primary care physician. They do not have a medical home. They don't have a pediatrician. So what if we can get folks in WIC offices? What if we can get folks in the emergency room to talk, to teach parents how to talk with their baby? And so they came through with this Talk With My Baby cross-sector initiative. And I'm going to show you the video for it. Notice the messaging, by the way.
All parents want the best for their baby, and we know healthy food helps grow a healthy baby. But to grow a healthy brain, babies need lots of loving words. A baby's brain grows super fast. Research shows that the amount of loving words a baby hears in the first 3 years of life can make a big difference. Meet baby Ella. Ella's mom, dad, grandma, and sister all shower her with lots of loving words and encouragement, and every word she hears helps her brain grow. By talking, reading, and singing with Ella, everyone is helping her develop an essential life skill, the ability to read by 3rd grade. And once Ella learns to read, she'll be ready and able to learn anything she wants. But what if Ella doesn't get lots of loving words as a baby? Without a steady diet of loving words, Ella may only know half the words of her friends, which will make her feel lost and behind. Without knowing as many words, it will be harder for Ella to express her feelings when she gets frustrated and school stops being fun. If she doesn't learn to read, she'll be 4 times more likely to drop out of school. And it gets worse. Kids who don't finish high school are more likely to have poor health, become a teen parent, be unemployed, and end up in jail. Not the future we imagined for baby Ella, is it? That's why it's so important for families, friends, and caregivers to talk with their babies early and often. The best part, it's free. All you have to do is talk with your baby as you go about your day. Not sure how to add more loving words to your day? Talk With Me Baby can help. On talkwithmebaby.org, parents, families, caregivers, and friends can learn more about early brain development, download resources, and sign up for daily texts with tips, video examples, and reminders to talk with your baby. Every parent, every family member, every one of us can make a difference in the life of a child. All it takes is starting the conversation.
Did you notice how they talk about babies' brains? They talk about language. They talk about their grade. They're drinking the collective impact Kool-Aid. They're saying the same message over and over again. They just now targeted a different audience. And it took people at the hospital, people at the university, people at an independent school for students with disabilities, and the United Way to all come together to produce this program, which is now free and available. You can go online and get it. Another resource that might help you is 2Gen. Some of you might have heard of 2-generation approaches as well. These are approaches where you target the family and the child at the same time. Oftentimes when we work towards improving outcomes for children and families, we silo those activities. So we have programs and initiatives that are centered on children, and we have programs and initiatives that might be centered on family. If you take a 2-generation approach, you're doing them both at the same time. Ascend at the Aspen Institute has a lot of resources that are available around 2-generation approaches. One example in real time is we were using a 2-generation approach at Educare Atlanta. Educare is a network of high-quality early learning education programs across the nation. There are over 20 Educare centers. There's one in Atlanta that is operated by Sheltering Arms. Sheltering Arms is a network of early childhood education providers in the metro Atlanta area. Together with Sheltering Arms, Atlanta Public Schools, and the Center for Working Families, they developed a 2-generation approach where families would come, and what you see here is this is the elementary school, Dunbar Elementary School, and this is the Educare Early Learning Center. They're attached to each other, and they share an atrium between them. The idea there was that a family could go into the Center for Working Families and declare that they need support with gainful employment. And one of the major barriers that you will often find for vulnerable families to moving up into gainful employment and sustainable employment is having access to early childhood. And so the Center for Working Families worked with Educare Atlanta to try to hold subsidies and spots for children in the Educare Center. So if you enrolled in a program at the Center for Working Families, we could get you a slot in Educare, which is one of the highest quality early learning centers in the city. The same would happen as if you walked into Educare. You walked into Educare to enroll your child, and through your enrollment process, the staff found out that you were struggling with finding gainful employment with a GED or what have you. They would introduce you to the Center for Working Families so that you could get support there as well. In other words, it doesn't matter what door you go in. No matter which door you go in, we're going to work with your child and we're going to work with your family. And in doing that, they developed a coaching protocol called the Bridge to Self-Sufficiency. It is adapted from the Pregnant Women's Union. They've been using this Bridge to Self-Sufficiency for several years to work with families to move themselves along. So you'll see indicators here, I know it's hard to see, but there are indicators here on family well-being and on gainful employment and those sorts of things. And what we added were indicators of school readiness and development. So that while you were coaching the family through improving itself and its own financial stability, we were also talking about how do we ensure that children are ready at the same time. So parents got coached on both of those together. That's a two-generation approach. And so there are many, many more cities that are starting to use two-generation approaches to improve outcomes with young children and families. It's another strategy you might have to consider adopting here. Last thing I want to talk to you about is equity. So now we've decided we're going to work together. We've decided that we're going to have the same message. We've decided that we're going to use the same data points and indicators to track our progress and tell our story and learn from each other. We decided we're going to have a balance of improvement and innovation in our approaches. But again, I ask you, what do we mean when we say all children? If you take an equity framework, you understand that equity means everyone getting what they need to thrive. Equity and equality are not the same thing. Equality means everybody gets the same thing, but you will notice that if everybody gets the same thing, you won't see the same outcome. Equity means sometimes people need different things to get the same outcome. Acknowledging that and working towards that. It also means you consider the system that is involved there. So for example, in this picture, and I'm sure many of you have seen this before, where you're contrasting equality and equity. One thing you have to think about isn't just making sure everyone has the same, has equitable resources. It's also thinking about how did we get there in the first place. So how long has this person been standing on these lots? Who put this fence here in the first place? How did we decide it was going to be in that order? What is this game they're watching? All of that is also part of a conversation around equity. So, to give you an example of what I mean by equity and why I think it matters to this question of whether or not all children are ready, I'm going to talk to you about my home. So I grew up in Atlanta. I recently moved from Atlanta, but I did grow up in Atlanta. When I grew up in Atlanta, there's my house right there that I grew up in on the south side of Atlanta. Here's the house I most recently moved in where I lived. Atlanta's right here downtown. Georgia State's right there downtown. All highways and roads cross in the middle of downtown Atlanta. I'm sure most of you are most familiar with the airport in Atlanta. Many of us travel through that airport to get anywhere in the world. And if you ever leave that airport, you drive around in this mess. And this mess is the connector. And you've got 85 going this way, and it eventually connects to 75 going that way, and all roads lead down out of the city on 75. You've also got the perimeter, 285, that's that circle that goes around. And so we talk fondly about people who live inside or outside of the perimeter. So you either live outside the perimeter here or inside the perimeter. And then I-20 cuts right across dead center of the city. So we talk about whether or not you live north or south of I-20. Now keep that map in mind and consider that in Atlanta, where you live makes a huge difference to your quality of life. So here we've got the perimeter, there's your circle. Here's the X marks the spot for downtown Atlanta, and this is I-20, that dotted line that's going across. What you will see is up here on the north side are primarily white and more affluent families. Down here are more African American and less affluent families. And I can take every indicator of quality of life from SNAP program participation to third grade reading scores to the number of students receiving free and reduced lunch, and you will see a very similar pattern. If you live below 20, and if you live below 20 inside the perimeter, your life outcomes are very different than if you live outside of the perimeter or north of 20. In Atlanta, your zip code is a much better indicator of your life expectancy than almost any other indicator of quality of life. How long you live, how many years you live, depends on where you live in Atlanta. So I'm asking you, what's your context here in Hillsborough? I've done a little digging around to pull up your data. I told y'all I like data. This is free and publicly available data. I just did a little Googling. So in the state of Florida, your chamber, the Florida Chamber, has started to take quite seriously a couple of indicators of outcomes for quality of life. And so these numbers are simply from the chamber. Here's your report card from the chamber from Hillsborough County. And what you will see is that many children in Hillsborough County are growing up in poverty. You will also see, here's another kids counts report for Hillsborough County. They look at multiple indicators as well. So you've got economic well-being indicators like children in poverty or children who live in homes where there's a high housing cost burden. You look at third grade reading scores, you look at 8th grade math scores. What you will see from these indicators is that Hillsborough County ranks 35 out of 67 counties in the state of Florida for these indicators of child well-being. Remember to put that into context that the state of Florida is number 40 out of 50 states. So it's not just your local context that makes a difference to your outcomes. Your state makes a difference, and decisions that are made at the state level is making a difference to your local outcomes as well. You can also look at indicators of health and well-being and family and community well-being, and you can see how Hillsborough County ranks. You have many children and families who are struggling in Hillsborough County. That is making a difference to how ready children are entering your schools. And it is making a difference to how well those third grade reading scores look, how many kids are graduating. If you just look at a heat map of your area, you can see participation in free and reduced lunch programs in Hillsborough County. Darker is bad. Ask yourselves, what schools are in those neighborhoods? What early learning centers are in those neighborhoods? In those neighborhoods, how many children are actually going to early learning centers and how many are staying with family, friends, and neighbors because they can't afford to go to early learning centers? It is false to believe that people make decisions around what early learning centers they send their children to based on quality. Most of us make those decisions based on affordability, on access, in other words, where they're located, what those hours are, how they're open and closed. That is how I made the decision on where my 4-year-old goes to school. And it is not based on quality, although he is in a quality place. I made it because it's in my neighborhood, and it's across the street from where my other kids go to school, which means I got one drop off, one pickup. I'm living the dream. That's how people make decisions. So the question is, when we talk about access to high quality early learning, the answer isn't simply saying, well, let's enforce quality and make sure that these places are of higher quality. Really, the answer is making sure that people don't have to make that decision at all. That no matter where they send their children, the quality will be high. whether it's at home with a family, a friend, a neighbor, or in center-based care, or it's at the local church, wherever it is. The key is to make sure that all of those places are of quality, not making sure that people just have access. Because that's not how we make our decisions. If you think about where those neighborhoods look like, if you think about where those schools are, if you think about where those children are, the next thing you want to ask yourself is what assets are there and available to support the children and families who live there. I'm giving you a map of one of those assets, which is your Children's Board Family Resource Centers. You have 6 here. I think this is a recent map, I'm not sure, but I Googled. So these are the centers that you have available to you. These centers are there by design to support young children and families. How are our schools connecting to these centers? How are our early learning providers? How are our family, friends, and neighbors connecting to those centers? If those connections aren't strong, what can we do to strengthen them? So we can talk a lot about what isn't there, but we should also be talking very much so about what is there. There are a lot of resources and assets in this community that can help us ensure that children enter school ready. So I'm going to leave you with this. If that's the charge, that all children enter school ready to learn and ready to succeed, then one solution is galvanizing this village. A common shared data-driven agenda that inspires stakeholders to work collectively to build capacity, improve programs and services, and create innovative solutions for the well-being of our most valuable asset. That's our children. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole. We have some time for questions. We have microphones in the center of the room, 2 of them. One is there, and there's another one over there, okay? So feel free to go up to the microphone and ask a question. If you want to think about what you'd like to ask. Are there any examples?
We just had a question about access to that PowerPoint. There was so much great information in there, and some of it was lost. Is that going to be available for us?
Yeah, so the question was access to the PowerPoint, because there were so many links and resources there. Yes, we can make the PowerPoint available to you. We have a list of all registrants, so we can just email that out. We might have to do the video because it's super big. But other than that, we can send it out.
Yeah, we have our IT people in the audience. I don't know, you know how large PowerPoint is with photos and stuff. So we may have to post it on our FCRR server, but we can still email you to tell you how to get it. Okay?
Hi, I'm Lori Tonti with the Hillsborough County Public Library. I really enjoyed seeing all of the partnerships and everything that you guys are doing in Atlanta. And have you been able to measure the impact of if this is actually moving the needle?
So, I think there's a 2-part answer to that. The first is for specific programs, yes, almost now we've moved to a point where people are demanding to see evidence that their resources are being put to good use and that their investments are being put to good use. And so within these partnerships are several programs, and each of those programs have an evaluative component. So for many of them, yes, we can see where where we're moving the needle, and we can see where we're not, and how those programs might need to be adjusted. For the bigger, larger initiative as to whether or not this work is moving the needle for the city of Atlanta, that we have just created something called PAT, whose acronym is losing me right now, but I'll make sure I come back around to it. But what we did was we worked with the city, school board, with a couple of local advocacy groups to create a collective group that is going to watch and implement recommendations and programs to move the needle for children in the city of Atlanta. And so that just came together. We just announced it, I believe, less than 3 months ago. And it will have its own evaluative component, so you will be able to watch the story over the time in the city of Atlanta to see if taking this larger global approach moves that needle for that one community. Does that make sense? Okay.
Good morning. What does Atlanta determine kindergarten ready? So after all this experience that they get that's very rich, it makes a lot of sense. How do you quantify that and say that they're kindergarten ready now?
This is a topic of heated debate in Atlanta. So I will say, so first, one step we did take, that organization Gears, and I'm gonna bring them back up for you so you can see them. Gears is a local advocacy group. They really do advocate across the state. They happen to be located in Atlanta. So we get a lot of interaction with them. They convened together a cross-sector group of individuals to come up with a shared definition of school readiness. And you can find that on their website. So that was really a very important first step because people really do define it differently. And depending on if you're talking to a teacher as opposed to a parent, for example, people have very different understandings of what it means to be ready for school. Some folks think it means that the child knows how to write their name and that they know their letters. And some people think that they know how to be good friends and they know how to sit quietly. Some people think that because you're 5, you're ready. And it really does, and I'm gonna tell you, I think that because you're 5, you're ready. So that's how I feel about it. You're ready. Whether or not that place is ready to receive you is a different question. When you turn 5, you're ready. But there are people who think differently about that. So we had to have some consensus around what we believe. And now that we have that report, you will see that there are, the report is divided into activities and things that individuals can do depending on if you are a teacher, a parent, a principal, the executive director of an early learning center, a librarian. There are different roles that everyone can play and you can tie an indicator in any one of those. That said, the state has just launched its kindergarten readiness assessment tool. It is a tool that was designed to be given within the first 6 weeks of school, and it is designed to inform instruction. So because of the way it is designed, we will not be able to come up with a number like percentage of kids who are ready. But it was designed that way on purpose because in our state we felt very strongly that we didn't want to tie those kinds of numbers to children prematurely. And what we wanted was that teachers had the information they needed to inform what their classrooms were going to look like and how they might start to deliver instruction in their classroom with their youngest learners, which was a resource, for example, principals really love because they have to figure out how they're going to organize all these kindergartners. They want to make sure that they're organizing them in such a way that they can get the most out of instruction that's going to happen in their classroom and not move children from the teacher they have the first day of school, for example. So there's some debate. There's significant debate right now in Georgia around having a school readiness tool. We haven't had an answer that everyone's satisfied with.